Good afternoon, guys, and welcome to the podcast. I've got Eric Malka with us today from Miami, Florida, and he is an entrepreneur. He's an investor. He's also the recent author of On the Razor's Edge, and he deals with number one skill helping clients is strategic brand investments in the luxury goods space. So we're going to talk about that, and I'm happy to have him on. Eric, welcome.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Briefly introduce yourself and we'll get started.
Eric Malka. I am a serial entrepreneur, most notable for my company called The Art of Shaving I built in the 1990s, which I exited, sold to Gillette as part of Procter Gamble in 2009. Since then, I've been an investor and now author of my book, On the Razor's Edge.
Interesting. Yeah, we were talking about in what is the number one problem that clients come to you for help with?
My audience of clients are young businesses, so early stage, and the usual suspects are they want to scale their company and they want to raise money, usually, and sometimes they get into some trouble in the early days, making some bad decisions. So overall, they come to seek advice, guidance. I do coaching of entrepreneurs. I sometimes invest in companies and I mentor their founders. So that's pretty much what they come to us about.
Interesting. Yeah. And so we talk about, you have the story of The Art of Shaving in On the Razor's Edge. Briefly talk about the key ideas, story behind that. And
sure. I didn't want to just it's a cool story. I was 17 when I arrived in New York City with $100, undocumented immigrant. 24 years later, I sell my brand to Procter Gamble. So the story's fun. It's a fun journey, but I wanted it to be a lot more than that. I really wanted to inject all the lessons and principles that have allowed me to achieve what so many entrepreneurs really aspire to do. And the premise of the book is that we hear a lot about successful people, but what we don't really talk about are the other 99% of entrepreneurs that are struggling and trying to achieve what the very few were able to achieve. So it begged the question, why me? Why was I able to go from an idea in my kitchen to a strategic acquisition in 12 years? That's something that very few people are able to do. And what I came to realize is that the failure rate for entrepreneurs is very high. It's extremely difficult to be an entrepreneur. I think the statistics from the Labor Bureau is that less than 1% of entrepreneurs, new businesses, will achieve $10 million in sales within 6 years. These are very harsh realities. To achieve $1 billion business, I think the odds are something like 0.0006%. So a little bit better than winning the big lottery to have $1 billion business, but the odds are really stacked against the entrepreneur. And that causes, so the book was really about reverse engineering our success stories and extracting some of the principles and elements that allow us to thread that needle, right? To avoid the pitfalls.
Interesting. And these startling statistics. And what are your advice for crushing your goals? And obviously, there's so many setbacks. So how
yeah, I think what entrepreneurs in the last 10 years have heard is you have to scale fast. You have to make mistakes quickly. I subscribe to a different train of thought. I believe that most of the failures happen in the first 3 to 5 years. And that's because very often, entrepreneurs are running too fast out of the gates. They want to succeed with their business plan in 3 to 5 years and exit the business. But the reality for any successful entrepreneur is that it takes 10 to 20 years, not 3 to 5 years. So the first few years is about going slow, and it's about understanding your business, understanding your customer, understanding your products, understanding the market, creating a foundation, creating a team, getting the funding, getting all the foundation. Building that rocket ship takes time. And then once that is in place, blast off, man. But if you try to blast off early, you might blow up in the air. And that's what I see a lot of entrepreneurs. It's an analogy, but that's what I see a lot of. They're running a sprint instead of a marathon.
Interesting. So a follow-up question I have for you is, how do your skills and strategies help with your current clients with the luxury brand space?
They're all, I look at each client differently. Every person is unique. And there are similarities, but there's not one strategy that works for everyone. There are universal rules, but then I look at people's values. I look at where they are, what they aspire to be in the next 5 to 10 years. And from there, we craft a path to achieve those goals. And what I really believe is trying to make it a little bit more fun. I think by reducing the speed, it reduces anxiety and it increases enjoyment of the ride and it maximizes the potential for success. I recently spoke to an entrepreneur. He was looking to raise $1 million for his new business. And I said to him, why are you raising so much money right now? You don't need that much money. And he felt such a sense of relief that somebody was saying that to him. A lot of anxiety just went away at that moment. And he realized, I only need a few $100,000 to get to my next level. So little things like that can make a huge difference. And I don't tell people how to win. Or most people that come to me, they're smart, they're driven, they're hardworking. They understand their business. They understand their industry. My job is not to tell them what to do. My job is to help them think things through methodologically to avoid making too many mistakes along the way. And that's really my job.
Interesting. And another follow-up question I have for you is, what made you go from the shaving business into the current business that you're in now? What sort of transitions or insights did you have into the luxury brands and goods?
Yeah, it's the same business. It's just that instead of me, I'm not an operator, I'm an investor, right? I like to think of myself as a professional athlete, whereas in my prime, I was on the court. I was winning championship on the field. I was the best player. But in my 50s, I get killed on the field. You need to be young, strong, driven, have fire in your belly. My place is in the owner's box, in the coaching staff, where I can support the winning team, but not be the player on the field. So for me, it was a transition that wasn't easy, but it was a transition I wanted to make from being an operator of a business, an entrepreneur that was lucky enough to have a liquidity event and to gain some financial freedom to do what I really am passionate about, which is to support the next generation of entrepreneurs. And that's how I transition.
Interesting.
But very much staying in my lane, by the way. I only support entrepreneurs in the area of business that I understand well.
Interesting. And what I really like that analogy where you're talking about being an owner and investor. And this topic, from founding to freedom, how to scale your business and prepare for self-management or a sale. What are your insights around that?
To prepare for exiting your business?
Yeah, how to scale your business and prepare for self-management or a sale.
Scaling your business, as I said before, you need to have all the foundations there, right? It's like putting up a skyscraper on a bed of sand. It's just going to crumble. You need a strong foundation, which includes your people in place, your products. You understand. Once you get the capital, which I call rocket fuel, you need to know exactly what to do with that capital because your business model is clear. You have a scalable business model, you have your people in place, and all you need is to get investors in to scale the business, to continue doing what you've been doing well, but at a larger scale. Scaling when you don't have the business model and the people in place can be a recipe for disaster. Now, exiting is a different animal because a lot of entrepreneurs are really built for M&A transaction. In my book, I call it Untrained to Slay the Dragon, because you're basically in the Super Bowl playing the biggest game of your life, but you've never played football in your life before. You haven't been trained for that. That's what a lot of entrepreneurs find themselves in. They are in front of people that are professional M&A executives or bankers, and you're trying to figure out how to navigate that at the most important time of your career. So that could be a very tricky time. And I talk about it a lot in my book, because I had a fairy tale story that was damaged by the financial crisis. I was selling my company in the middle of the 2008 meltdown, and that really threw our whole process for a loop. So it's a whole interesting story. I come out on the other end successful, but not without taking a few punches and a couple of scars along the way.
Interesting. Yeah, it reminds me, it's just you work so hard and you have this grit to build a successful company, and then when it's time to exit, it's like, it's like, how do you manage that?
Yeah, what do you do?
um,
One thing I would recommend that I wish I had is someone that's actually exited the business, that is not benefiting from your sale directly, that can give you some advice, sit on your shoulder.
And so we'll move on to the exit strategy, and is what entrepreneurs need to know before they sell their business and how to maintain long-term value.
The most valuable aspect of any company at exit is the intellectual property. It's not the assets and it's not the balance sheet, right? Your equipment, all these things are not valuable. What's valuable to a buyer is a patent, a trademark, a URL, proprietary product, technology. These are things that really get the big dollars at exit. That's why I talk a lot about companies versus brands. I was able to get a decent exit because I was selling a brand, and 95% of my purchase price was allocated to my trademark. They couldn't care less about my stores and my furniture and my inventory. All that stuff is irrelevant to the buyer. But when you have a great company that's making a lot of profit and somebody offers you 6 or 7 times or 8 times EBITDA, I think you need to pause. You need to understand why you're selling. Because if my business was generating incredible profits, I probably would still be running it today. But I was building a brand, I was getting market share, and I got 3 times revenue for my business, or 2.5 times revenue for my business, when it was actually losing EBITDA every month. So very different scenarios. Get yourself a good banker. Try not to be a big fish, a small fish in a big pond. I made the mistake of hiring a huge bank called Goldman Sachs. And even at the size of my transaction, I was a tiny minnow in the sea for them. So try to find a bank that is going to value the size of transaction that you're looking to have.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah. And this exit, there's always this founder's dilemma, is you have someone offers you either M&A or an exit, and what makes you like, how do you decide between staying on and building it even more? For example, like Facebook, or who knows what Instagram would be if Facebook hadn't acquired it. So how do you determine whether to stay on and grow it more, or sell it?
That becomes a very personal question. Sometimes that option is available to you. And I know people that had big transaction that kept 30 or 35% stake in the company because they can have a second exit later on. I think that's a beautiful scenario. I think you have to make sure that whatever you're getting when you lose control is enough for you to have financial freedom. If you're counting on the next money, that may never come. And if you lose control, you're done. So make sure that whatever you're getting today is enough. If you get nothing else, that's enough. And if that's a lot, then consider keeping some chips on the table for maybe an even bigger payday, because you can afford to take that risk. It's all risk and reward. The relationship between risk and reward should be how you determine every decision you make in life, right?
Yeah, it's always a interesting dilemma. Like when you get to that point, and it's because everybody is struggling to get to that point. But once you get there, it's like, what do you do? So that's really some great advice.
And I would also caution everyone about um, what's called the bias that we have in our head. A confirmation bias can be a huge threat to somebody selling their company. In my case, Goldman Sachs told me that my company was worth $180 million. And I wanted to believe that so badly. I hired that. But also, people can believe that their company is worth a lot more than it is. Or there's plenty of situation where confirmation bias can be your number one enemy in your head. So you need to have somebody that can keep reality in check, right? Check and balance.
Yeah. How can people find out more about you and connect with you?
And you can find me at ericmalka.com or strategicbrandinvestments.com.
Yeah. Awesome. Interesting conversation and really enjoyed it. And thanks so much for coming on.
Oh, thank you, man.